joining us. I'm Randall Bennett. Web 2.0, it's one of those buzzwords that you either like, you hate, or it gets on your nerves. At this point, I'm kind of sick of it. But regardless, Web 2.0 as a concept is still going strong. And some companies that have been coming out over the last couple years labeled as Web 2.0 aren't doing so bad either. Especially in this bad economy, it's a little bit surprising. Companies like Meebo, which today announced it's created a new advertising placement that goes in the background of their browser, a new way, or the background of their application, and it's a new way for them to generate revenue. To talk about the state of the Web 2.0 union, we bring in two of Web 2.0's finest journalists. We have Alan Stern from CenterNetworks. Alan, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. Also, we have Marshall Kirkpatrick from ReadWriteWeb. Marshall, how are you?
Life on this end is a dream come true.
Nice. So let's jump right in. Alan, what do you think of Web 2.0 right now in this bad economy? It seems like it's not doing too bad. What do you think?
So, you mentioned the Meebo announcement of their new ad option today. And actually it reminds me of something that we used to do in my corporate life years ago with Yahoo. Back in I guess it was the early 2000s, Yahoo had an option with the Yahoo Messenger where you could actually brand the Yahoo Messenger and create themed Yahoo Messenger skins. And I can't remember exactly how much we paid for it, but I think it was somewhere around $25,000 for a month.
Yeah.
And basically what they did was they put the theme out there and people downloaded it. And actually it did really well. And since we were marketing things like paper plates and paper cups and fun things for kids, it actually worked really well. So I think this could work well too. I think what happens a lot of times is that users will push back on any change. We're seeing this with Facebook as well. And as long as Meebo stands firm with it, I think it'll work out okay. I think it's very important, obviously, with a business like Meebo or eBuddy, which is in the same space, that they're obviously pushing advertising heavily. That's their model.
So what do you think about like how Meebo stands to do in this bad economy? Do you think that this, obviously they're trying to make revenue and they're trying to generate more revenue than they had in the past with those smaller advertisements. Do you think this is something where they're going to stick around longer because of this?
Well, I think anything they can do to generate revenue is a good thing. My guess is that their users will stay. It's, obviously I think there's a lot of brand loyalty to Meebo or to eBuddy. And so, whichever one people are with, I think they'll wind up staying with it. So yeah. I think it'll do well. Meebo was one of the stronger startups. I don't know, obviously I don't know their financial statements, but it seems to be one of the ones that has done pretty well over the last few years.
Marshall, what do you think? Web 2.0, it's been around for a couple years. Do you think that this bad economy is going to sour anything, or do you think people will still be doing okay?
Oh, I think that things are looking up for some people and down for others. It depends on where you look. TechCrunch, for example, is keeping track, and I believe the last number they reported was 300,000 job losses in the tech field. But then if you come over to ReadWriteWeb, we have a new site called JobWire where we're reporting on the other side of the story, new hires, and there are far more new hires going on every day in tech and new media than we're able to report on. So that's...
It's kind of interesting. It sounds like things are, kind of better than we might have expected in this Web 2.0. A lot of people were predicting that Web 2.0 was going to be a bubble and it was going to burst just like the first .com bubble. I don't think, it sounds like we're not really seeing that in your view.
Oh, it's hard to say. I think there will be lots of little companies that, that shrivel up or sell their assets on the cheap to some place where they can get a job, et cetera, over the next year. But it's hard to know how much of that is just natural churn, how much of it is attributable to the state of the economy, and how much of it is, the bubble critique holding true. Just today we saw kappahd say, all right, we're going to hand over we're going to start selling our code and charging every API developer money, and that's a bookend on this story on one end, and then on the other end of the spectrum is the Meebo announcement where Meebo has tens of millions of dollars in the bank, and they're not averse to risk at all when experimenting with new features.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see both of those kinds of stories.
Leading next week into the Web 2.0 Expo, that's kind of been seen as one of those events that people they go to, they talk, it's a conference, whatever. Do you think that the environment will be a little bit different next week at the Expo, Marshall?
Oh, I would not be surprised if some number of people decide to stay home. just to save money, but I wouldn't be surprised if that weren't the case as well. You know, I've been to 2 conferences here in the last week and a half, one of which was a journalism related conference, and attendance was down a little bit there, but then South by Southwest attendance, I think, was unusually high.
Just forget about spending money. You know, eat and drink, be merry. It's still a conference. It's a good time. So, Alan, what are you thinking? Are you thinking that this is going to be a little bit different next week at the Web2.0 Expo?
Well, I think South by Southwest is kind of an interesting case because it's very inexpensive to attend. Austin is a relatively inexpensive city as opposed to London or New York or San Francisco. And overall, the conference itself is very inexpensive, and I think $350. So people are going to spend money. That's a great place to spend it because you get a lot of days. I think you get 4 full days of sessions and parties and everything out of it. So when you compare that to a TechCrunch 50 at $3,000 or a demo at $3,000 or Web2.0 Expo, which I think is $2,000, you see that people are looking to save money wherever they can. In terms of what I think we'll see, I just think that companies are starting to realize that, and this is something, frankly, I've been saying since the day I started CenterNetworks 2 years ago, is that you need to launch with a business model. And it doesn't mean that the business model needs to be in place on day one, but you need to know what it is. Walking in and saying, my startup and my hope is to just get a lot of users and then figure it out, that just doesn't work anymore. And in fact, the companies, and I'm not going to name any of them, but the companies that are trying to do that are in really tough position right now because, even if you get the users, what are they really worth? Last night I was listening to Loic Lemure talk at some business school. He didn't say what the business school was, so I don't know which one it was. And most of his speech was about him and his company. But one of the things he said was that for early adopters, it's very tough because with his tools, all of the early adopters will just jump to the better tool or the next tool tomorrow. Yeah. So what happens when you do that? For him, I think with Twirl, I guess what he's calling a social software, a lot of people have jumped to TweetDeck and to some of the other tools. And so how does that help or hurt him as well? So overall, I would say that I think we're going to see companies realizing that they need to launch with business models, which is a very, very good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very true that, some business model, I guess one of the lessons learned from Web 1.0 was, you don't just launch a product. I think that, maybe you're right that next week we might see some of that. Marshall, anything else to add before
I disagree with that. You name a startup out there, and I think they've got some vision of what their business model could be, but almost all of the companies out there that have succeeded have changed their business models, some substantially over time. And if nothing else, there's advertising or selling aggregate data to ad networks, and between that, premium accounts. I think that if you build up enough users, you should be able to build a business model if you hadn't had one all along.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Let's wrap this up. Alan Stern, you're at CenterNetworks.com. Also, you had another project you wanted to talk about really quick, just 15 seconds.
Yeah, so I just launched my new startup late last year. It's called Cloud Contacts, and it's at cloudcontacts.com. Basically, what we do is we take your business cards, we digitize them, and we create contact pages that you can actually connect to and see what each person is doing right now.
Sweet. All right, thanks, Alan. And also Marshall Kirkpatrick, ReadWriteWeb. You're on Twitter, I'm sure. Everyone's everywhere. Anything else, Marshall? Thanks for joining us.
No, good luck with the show. Thanks for having us both on. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming out. I'm Randall Bennett for TechVi, and we'll see you next time. TechVi.com for everything tech and greatness. See ya.